Well, this is Africa, and it's unfortunate that we're having this type of experience, having gotten over the Rwandan genocide of 1994. Democratic Republic of Congo, which was once Zaire under Mobutu, has suffered decades of war. And between 96 and 98, of course, there is a report of the loss of more than 5 million lives. In the case of the collapse of the Syrian regime, that is more like an authoritarian regime that was crushed by Protestant citizens in the form of an uprising, maybe backed by the West. But in this case, this is Africa undoing itself and its own. And the fear is that this case, if not urgently arrested, and if not declared a global emergency requiring actionable interventions from African states, will escalate into a regional war. And we are not ready at this time to be faced with this type of conflict that always results in continuous instability. Currently, the UN has estimated a number of people running into millions that are now are internally displaced within that axis. So I think that one of the cure to this conflict is that African states must declare a regional, the African Union rather, must declare a regional emergency over that axis, spanning between DRC, Rwanda, and the South Africa. Remember that DRC is membered in two regional bodies, the Eastern African Community as well as the Southern African Development Community, as it were, SADC. So it's important that this matter be taken up seriously as an emergency, else we begin to record another round of needless killings. You may call it pogrom, you may call it genocide, because in this case, we are no longer having just ethnic militias who have taken to the streets to kill their own people, either demanding that the government has become so bad and so terrible. But you have interest from sister states, neighboring states.
And like Livingston, Rwanda, that's where, I also went to, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Because we've seen, the new U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, saying that Rwanda has to do, that's President Paul Kagame has to do what it takes to ensure there is a ceasefire. There is also the Congolese government saying that the United Nations Security Army should have another session to decide on this issue. But my question really is, whether it's from the international community or whether it's from the African Union or even SADC, why are we not seeing tougher actions being taken against Rwanda?
Well, it's because this is Africa. And let's not pretend about it. There is interest from different ends because of the mineral resources in that axis. You can't take away that fact. So only instability will weaken the value of these mineral resources and allow them to be stolen under the guise of either ethnic conflict, which it's already taken the toll from the Tutsis, who are said to have been, by way of border delineation, made to become part of Congo, arising from the Berlin Conference, the Leopold story of Belgium and so on. So the point is that the reason you may not have seen stronger sanctions meted out against Rwanda may be because of the backup. Whoever is backing Rwanda at this point, and I think Paul Kagame, who has become a major and strategic African statesman, should look historically and not be a signatory to that which may result in the type of disaster and conflict that may engulf the whole of that region. It is not good for the economic development and the recoveries that have been made post-genocide Rwanda 1994. And that is why African leadership must rise at this time. Unfortunately, leadership in Africa is very weak and very frail. And that's why people do these things and get away with it. And the likes of Kagame, who have prized themselves as statesmen in Africa as well as Pan-Africanists may end up becoming the opposite of themselves if strong leadership is not asserted to bring this type of conflict to the table, where all the warring parties are made to sit down and resolve this conflict.
And who can exercise in terms of strong leadership? Because I mean, the region was looking to hold on just a minute. This region was looking to South Africa, but South Africa is also now getting involved with its part with Rwanda, saying if more of their soldiers are being killed in that war, it will mean a declaration of war between South Africa and Rwanda. So where does who has the authority now to come in terms of diplomatic solution?
You see, that's why when we talk about the African Union, that it should be strengthened and be made to be a government indeed to exercise certain binding powers on African states. Players begin to play to the gallery. At this time is where the AU, the African Union, should step in and take over the process of restoring order by calling the leadership of these respective states to a table, and as well as the leadership of you call it the rebel groups, the M23 and so on, to sit down and address these issues and have them negotiated on a diplomatic roundtable. Because look, the only result that will emerge from the ongoing conflict will be further destruction of the gains of development. It is not like we have the Bakassi people who are now in Cameroon, who were once in Nigeria. That is how you have these Tutsis in Congo. And again, that's also an offshoot of bad governance in Africa. Because the argument the Tutsis are holding is that army has crashed, justice system has crashed in Congo, whereas they who are minority within the borderlines have been marginalized. So they are now running the narrative that the reason behind the revolt is to restore good governance in DRC. Whereas there are those who are playing the script of running the mineral resources in DRC, using these other entities as mercenaries or as channels to gain control over. So you see conflicting narratives of either marginalization and bad governance, or those who are saying, no, it's not about marginalization, but they are saying that the interest is on the mineral resources in these areas. So the UN has to now show leadership, and this justifies and brings to the fore the cry that the UN must evolve into an institution that has binding powers based on its protocols and charters to be able to arrest these type of conflicts and disputations when they arise, so that Africa does not continue to be engulfed by uncontrollable and unmanageable conflict of this magnitude. Because going by the current trend, it may result in a full-blown regional war, and this may end up becoming one of Africa's world war. God forbid. But the world is now watching and is looking like a joke. But it's spreading very fast, and the casualty rate is rising very fast. And it looks like the whole global community, just like they've given attention to Ukraine, is not giving the same attention to this incident, all because it's Africa. But Africa must take responsibility, because the destruction will be incalculable if allowed to continue like that.
Livingston, but I need to put you on hold. We're going to take a break now, and then when we return, we'll continue this conversation with you. And with that conversation with Livingston and many more stories. Stay with us. All right, thanks for staying with us. So you're watching The What Now on TVC News. We've been talking about the crisis and the conflict in Democratic Republic of Congo vis-a-vis the East African region and the South African region as well. We've been speaking with international affairs analyst Livingston Weche, who has been standing by for us. Livingston, I wanted us to expand the conversation to just look at crisis, because you tried to touch on it. Just crises around the African region. For example, we've seen crises between, and most times is really about secessionist groups. For example, the one between Morocco and Algeria, where Morocco is accusing Algeria of arming rebels as well. There is Ethiopia and Eritrea also having issues, around land grab and rebels. I just wanted you to address all of this and why there have been no permanent solution.
Let me say this to you, precious, and viewers. Africa will continue on this sad road of blood. We'll continue to walk on the path of blood-tarred roads until we realize that our destiny is in our hands. There is a total collapse of trust and confidence among Africans, particularly between the leadership and the led. And until that redemption is established, what we will see are roads tarred with blood. God forbid. So the solution continues to be, I've made recommendations. The African Union was set up in order to ensure Africa's integration and to pursue peace and sustainable development within the continent. But there are laws and protocols to realize this set objective, which particularly has to do with the empowerment of the Pan-African Parliament to become a legislative body that makes binding laws among member states. As I talk to you today, the Pan-African Parliament that we all brag about has remained an advisory and consultative body pursuant to the Constitutive Act that establishes the Pan-African Parliament. And that has made the AU very powerless, that there are no binding instruments where these institutions can enforce to make for peace and resolve conflicts within the African continent, like you have in their counterpart organization, such as the European Union. So I look forward to stakeholders seeing and seizing this opportunity to have member states to sign up to the treaty for the African Parliament through the instrumentality of the AU to become a law-making institution where such laws are binding, where defaults by member states or any regional organization, those laws can be enforced against them. But we have just an advisory and constitutive body that has no powers to make binding laws. And you know what happens in a state of lawlessness. All you see is chaos. So as member nations of the African Union, these states do not have any that bind them, that compel their allegiance to the protocols that govern the African Union. So they continue to play their cards with arbitrariness and impunity. And that's what you have across Africa. Now, the payback is the resultant effect of bad governance. So the regional conflict, whether you call it ethnic, instituted or instigated conflict, like you have between the Hutsis and Tutsis, pouring in between DRC and Rwanda, as you mentioned, between Morocco as well as the one in Algeria, you keep having them in spread across Africa. Africa must wake up. We cannot continue on this trajectory. We cannot.
We hope that beyond South Africa, that some other countries like Kenya and Nigeria will rise to the occasion to resolve most of these conflicts. Thank you so much for your time.
I pray.
International law expert Livingston Wiche.
This medium, Precious, to please call on the global community. There is the need for a global action on what is happening right now in DRC because Africa is currently on the brink.
Thank you so much, Livingston. Always a pleasure to have you on. All right, we're staying in Africa where a new outbreak of the Ebola virus has been confirmed in the Ugandan capital, Kampala, by the country's Ministry of Health.